Good morning. Well, as you can see, I got my big screen behind me, and we are going to go ahead and finish with all the film clips that I do want to show you from the motion picture chapter. This chapter sometimes takes me 2 full weeks to get through because there's so much that's going on with it. But as I said at the beginning of the semester, there are some times when things that are currently going on in mass media could disrupt our schedule. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, especially because of this particular chapter. It is truly unprecedented what is going on as it relates to motion pictures and the movie industry, and that you guys are actually, as young people, living through this whole thing, and you may not realize the monumental shakeup that's happening in the movie industry. You know, as we finished up with Nation. Oh my God, 1915, Birth of a Nation. I'm sorry. And by the way, I made a big mistake, people. I should have been more specific. Not one of you got the assignment the way I was looking for it, and I guess I just didn't explain it right. Although I will say that the articles that you did find, I hope you read, because they were really detailed in what exactly happened when Birth of a Nation was released. And again, this is the first time that you see a movie really have an effect on our culture. And when we come back next week, I have some film clips to show you where I show you a couple of other films that truly had an impact on our culture. But with Birth of a Nation, you know, we had come out of Reconstruction. We had come out of the compromise of 1876, that presidential election. And it looked like we had turned the page. It was the early 1900s, and yeah, there might have been some racial animosity, some whites who were very jealous of black people who were now starting to, pick themselves up and become a part of societies, even though it had been 40 years since slavery. And then this movie comes out. And this movie glorifies an organization, as you saw, that was dead. The Ku Klux Klan was dead. I mean, it was gone. It had pretty much not existed since the early 1870s. And then this just revived it. 9 years after Birth of a Nation. Like I said, I think if you guys read some of your articles, it's only a couple of thousand people were in the Ku Klux Klan in 1915 when the movie was released. And then 9 years later, in 1924, not only were there millions of people, but you had 400,000 Klansmen marching. And if you ever want to see something absolutely crazy, go to YouTube and search for that. Klan March on Washington, D.C., 1924. And you see 400,000 Ku Klux Klan in their little Halloween costumes marching on our Capitol. It's just crazy. And like I said, you had now the massive movement up north. And as a matter of fact, there was a young lady during Black History Month a couple of years ago who came to Bergen, and she had written a book about that migration up north, the great move of African Americans from the south to the north, and it starts in 1915. And that's because of, and like I said to you guys last time, in 1915, the population of Detroit, Michigan was 96% white. But what happened was now all of a sudden, all this the Klan, we have pride in the Klan, oh, the Klan's great now, and they started to do their crazy stuff, and it drove people up north, and that's how a lot of the northern cities have such large black populations, which they really didn't have because of Birth of a Nation. It just empowered a lot of very crazy people to go ahead and put on these white hoods and do the things that they were doing. So now let's talk about, today. One of the things that we start seeing established, even during the silent film era, is the idea of going to these darkened theaters and watching a motion picture or movie. And that's pretty much been the business model up until just a few years ago, is that you would actually, for the movies to make money, is that you would go ahead and you would go to a theater and you would sit and watch the film. And then as the years have gone by, and we'll talk more a little bit about this next week, but after World War II, you had the advent of television, which started to take some audience away, but they were able to start bringing some people back. Number one, they would make the movies bigger and better than they ever were before. But what's more is people really needed to get out of the house. This is where that moniker "dinner in a movie" came from. Was after World War II, is people really needed to, now get out of the house due to the baby boom. And, movies started to become an event. Going to the movie, instead of as it was prior to World War II, in the early 1940s, or even just right after World War II, like 1946, 1947, you were going to the theater sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. Again, we love to be visually entertained. So people were actually, and theaters were everywhere. I mean, you couldn't walk 6 or 8 blocks without going to a theater. I mean, some of you can see some of your towns now, how big they are. But if you live in Ridgewood or you live in Westwood, okay, where is the theater? It's right in the center of town. And at the time that theater was built, whether it's the one in Westwood or in Ridgewood, you were never more. Most people didn't live but 6 or 8 blocks walk from the theater. That's why there's no big parking lot around it. People would walk to the theater and then they would walk home afterwards. But of course there were also smaller theaters that were closer by too. And you never usually walked more than 6 or 8 blocks to get to a theater, no matter where you were in New Jersey or pretty much in America, except for in very rural areas. So, it became an event and you would go to the theater. And of course, things got bigger and better. But as TV started to get more sophisticated and you started to get cable television and you started to get more options to stay home, of course, the movies would then start to not only build them bigger, but the sound. But then this is where they tried to get you. If we're going to get you in the door, we still got to make some money. So this is where the small popcorn is now $8 or $9. A large popcorn pretty much costs the same as a small car. But, they were going to try and get you in. And, of course, once we got to, movies like Avatar, if you were going to see one of those 3D movies, it was going to cost you $20 to $22 a person, depending on where you went. If you went on a Friday night to see Avatar when it first opened, it was going to cost you $22. But now we're starting to see a shift. Now, this is something, and I think I mentioned this before to you guys, this is something I thought was going to happen years ago when we first got pay-per-view. Now pay-per-view started in the 80s, where you would pay your cable company to get a broadcast of something, and they would go ahead and unlock a channel that they had, and you could be able to watch it. And in the 90s, they started to perfect it more, especially with boxing, pro wrestling, UFC. The pay-per-view thing was really starting to pick up. And I thought this is when they were going to start doing this with movies. But there was still something not only about you going into that darkened theater and that big screen, but also the theater companies like AMC and Bowtie and all of those were making deals with the movie studios. Keep your movies here. Don't put it on paper. Keep your movies here, and we'll give you a little bit more money every time a ticket is sold. And that's what's been happening. It's still going on today, where the theaters, they want to stay relevant, especially as we're in COVID, and most of them were closed entirely for almost a year. Starting to open up now, but one of the other reasons why I thought we were finally going to start seeing this a while ago is, and I think I told you guys this before, I'm not sure, in 2007, when I bought my condo, I bought a condo, and I bought my first ever HD TV. Now, I didn't know much about HD TVs at the time, but I bought the most inexpensive 32-incher. Now, 32 inches, okay? It was some Walmart brand called ILO, I-L-O. Never heard of it, but it was the cheapest 32-inch HD TV, and it cost me $598 plus tax. Have you checked yet to see what you can get for $598 right now? You can get a Vizio 65-inch 4K for $598. I mean, it's amazing. And some of you know, because I'm looking at some of you, especially you guys out there I'm looking at right now, come Black Friday in November, you're standing in line at the Best Buy at 5 a.m. waiting to get those big screens for like $199 or whatever it is that they're doing that. Target does that too sometimes. But the bottom line is that almost every household, and it doesn't matter what your income is, okay? You may be a large family in a small apartment, but if there's one thing, I see this a lot. I'm driving down one of the main roads in my town, and there are some apartments on each side. And if the windows happen to be open or even just up a little bit, you really can't see much in that apartment except for that giant screen TV that's up against the wall. Even in houses that are up and down my street, and these are small, I don't live in a very big, rich neighborhood. And when you see some of these smaller homes, and if the living room window just happens to be, the shades happen to be up a little bit, if there's one thing you see prominently at night is that huge screen TV. So, almost every one of us now has at least one of these in our home, one of those big 55 or 65 inches. I mean, even this is only 55 inches. Because my living room isn't a very huge living room, it works extremely well for my family. I mean, you could be almost everywhere in our living room and really see everything. I was watching the Yankee game yesterday, coming in beautiful, in 4K, no problem. So now, I thought that with all of these big, large TV screens now coming in, this was what I thought was going to happen, is that now you could, when a movie was released, say on a Friday, as typically movies are released on a Friday. Let's say it was the new Eddie Murphy movie, the new Coming to America, that you would pay $25 pay-per-view, and you would be able to get it. Now, of course, to get it in your home, if you're going to pay $25, you're going to have 3 or 4 other people with you. That was, the way you do for a pay-per-view, like a UFC fight or something like that. You'd get a bunch of people together. If you're going to pay the kind of money at the UFC, you're paying, $65 or something like that for a UFC event? But you're going to have 5 or 6 people with you. Same thing with a movie, and I thought that, it would be like $25 and everything else. But again, they were hesitant. The movies studios were having their deals with the theaters. And then right before COVID is where we saw the real first shift. And that, of course, who can guess? Who can guess what it was? What movie was it? Anybody remember? Well, it was produced by Netflix. Now, Netflix has really changed the bar here. Netflix at first was begun as a company where, you rented a DVD, it got sent to your house, you put it back in the envelope they gave you when you finished, and you sent it back. And then, of course, they started to stream. And you could rent old movies. But then they started to make a lot of money. So now they started to produce their own content. First, of course, with television shows, Orange is the New Black, and, of course, House of Cards, were the first ones. And, of course, they've produced many since. And then, of course, they started producing their own movies. And it became such a big deal, some of the Netflix movies so popular, that even the Academy, the Motion Picture Academy that gives out the Academy Awards, how to now start looking and say, well, maybe we should, start nominating some of these because people liked them, or they loved them, or the critics absolutely exploded how great this movie they think it is. So Netflix really started shifting the game. So here's Netflix. They produce a movie with acclaimed director Martin Scorsese called The Irishman. Okay, it's about an old mobster who supposedly is the one who shot and killed Jimmy Hoffa. Now, of course, the movie stars Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, and even some of the great supporting actors. Ray Romano has the supporting role. Sebastian Maniscalco, one of my favorite stand-up comics, does a great Crazy Joe Gallo. And there's an Irish actor, and his name I can't remember right now, and he plays Anthony Provenzano and does an amazing job. He's a great actor. I've seen him in so many things. But the bottom line is that Netflix produced it, and this is what they did. They made a deal with the theaters. We'll release it November 1st, 2019. For 3 weeks. So for 3 weeks and 3 weeks only, The Irishman was in theaters. As soon as those 3 weeks were up, boom, disappeared from every theater and was on Netflix exclusively. Now, this made a lot of money for Netflix because they were now going to start drawing in a lot of the audience that they hadn't had yet. See, they had young people. And I may even had people my age, but people older than me. People who grew up watching, I grew up watching De Niro and Pacino, but I was a young kid when they were major stars as adults. But what about adults who were the same age as De Niro and Pacino? People in their 70s who maybe, Netflix, what's on Netflix? I don't know that Netflix stuff. Well, now all of a sudden, what? This movie, The Irishman? Well, I'm not getting out to the theater to watch it, but I want to see this movie. So they go ahead and they get themselves a Netflix account, and it worked beautifully. And now, as we continue to slowly open up the theaters, you now see some of these other deals. I had mentioned the new Eddie Murphy movie, his new Coming to America, which was released in theaters, but also simultaneously on Amazon Prime. Okay? Which I'm sure pushed Amazon Prime subscriptions up tremendously because critically, it was a very successful movie. Netflix we talked about, and then let's talk about Hulu. A movie I decided to watch because I heard it was coming out, and it supposedly had won all of these critical awards. Oh, that was my wife in her pajamas. Was the movie Nomadland. Okay? And I decided to watch it. It's with the actress Frances McDormand, who's an Academy Award winner. And, I have my own thoughts about the movie, but it was, of course, I watched it on Hulu. And yet, since I watched it on Hulu, it has now garnered Academy Award nominations for Best Picture and Best Actress for McDormand. And, of course, released on Hulu. So, this is where I think we're going to start seeing this, because even though theaters are going to start opening up, this might be the best way to go for them. This might be the best way. And again, you might have a Hulu or an Amazon or Netflix might produce their own films and say, listen, we want you to go, you want to go to the movie theater, but wouldn't you rather stay at home, have your own bathroom, make your own popcorn? Hell, you can go get 2 boxes for $5 of that Orville Redenbacher microwave popcorn instead of paying $8 for a small at the theater. And they might convince more people, especially as these are bigger and more sophisticated than they've ever been before. So you are living in an unprecedented time when it comes to motion pictures. Okay? What is happening is truly, truly amazing. Something I thought was going to happen years ago, but because of COVID, and not as COVID has helped it out a lot. But I guess, when you saw what happened with Netflix first with The Irishman before COVID, we're going to start seeing more of this. And as we have, the Eddie Murphy movie, that would have probably been a huge, big box office. As we saw with Nomadland on Hulu, now which wouldn't have done big box office, but it would have done enough because it was so critically acclaimed. I know there's some other movies that have come out recently that were released on either HBO Max or some of the others that either were simultaneously released in theaters or would have instead been in the theater if it wasn't for COVID. And I think this is going to happen in the future, or continue in the future, especially as we have these big screens. I love going to the movies myself. I love going to the theater. But if that's the only way I'm going to be able to see this movie, this is one of the things that I love about this time period. And I hope you guys fully realize when you're living, what time period when it comes to mass media you're living, is because you have so much of your choice of what you want. Okay, I'll give you a great example. Let's say 20 years ago, 2001, or 1999. If I have a favorite TV show, and let's say that TV show's on CBS Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock, and it's October. Let's say I just happened to miss that episode. Maybe didn't set my VCR to record it, all right, because there is no DVR right now. I didn't set my VCR, so I didn't record it. I missed it. This is the first week of October. I missed that episode. Do you know when the next chance is I'm going to be able to watch that episode? June, when the summer reruns come up. Now, you can DVR it. Or as soon as, especially if you have like what I have, YouTube TV, as soon as it airs, it's already ready for me to get on demand. Or even if I spent a little extra money, I could go to CBS or the Paramount website where CBS is headquartered, and I'd be able to watch it immediately. It's an unprecedented time, and you're living right in the middle of it. And when it comes to motion pictures and the movies, the sky's the limit to see what's going to happen. Now, does it mean it could be the end of some theater chains? Probably. But if I don't feel like getting in my car, going to a theater, which again, it's still a great event. I still love getting into that, and especially when the next James Bond film comes out, the last one for Daniel Craig. I'm going to that theater with that big screen. But if I just don't feel like it, and I want to sit in my recliner and watch on my big screen, that's what I want to do. And I should be able to do that. And right now, it looks like the movie studios are telling the theater chains, we're going to go with the Hulus, the Amazon Primes, the Netflix, and or HBO Max, and that's how we're going to release this film. All right, you guys, have a terrific weekend. Don't forget, by noon today, get those research papers in. And we'll see you next week to continue with the movie chapter. Got a lot of good clips to show you guys.